The emergency sirens screamed through the massive corridors of the Zilani flagship Eternal Hope, their piercing wail echoing off crystalline walls that had once sparkled with the light of 1,000 peaceful worlds. Now those same walls were cracked and dim, reflecting the desperate faces of a dying civilization. High Counselor Velthor's 6 arms trembled as she held the ancient book, its pages glowing with forbidden knowledge that her ancestors had locked away 10,000 years ago. The leather binding felt warm against her pale blue skin, as if the very words inside were alive and hungry for release. Around her, the bridge crew worked frantically at their stations, their multiple eyes focused on tactical displays that showed nothing but Redenemy contacts swarming across 17 star systems like a plague of mechanical locusts. "Status report," Velthor commanded, her voice barely steady. Commander Zethka turned from his console, his face grim. "The Harvester fleet has just finished consuming Rillic Prime, 3 billion souls gone in 6 hours. They're converting the entire planet's mass into pure energy to fuel their expansion." Velthor closed her primary eyes, feeling the weight of her species' extinction pressing down on her shoulders. The Harvesters had appeared from the void 3 years ago, massive geometric ships that moved with cold precision, stripping worlds bare and converting everything into resources for their endless reproduction. No negotiation was possible. No mercy was shown. They simply consumed, multiplied, and moved on. "How long until they reach the core worlds?" she asked. 18 standard days, High Counselor. Maybe less." The bridge fell silent except for the constant hum of life support systems and the distant rumble of the ship's engines. Velthor opened the ancient tome, its pages crackling with age. The text was written in Old Zilani, a language so archaic that only the highest scholars could read it. But she had studied these forbidden words for months, preparing for this moment she had hoped would never come. "The Great Calling," she read aloud, her voice echoing in the sudden quiet. "When all hope is lost and death stalks the children of light, seek the walkers in shadow, those who make the void their home and embrace death as a companion." Her tactical officer, young Kelvin, looked up from his station with wide eyes. "Counselor, surely you don't mean to—" "The ritual has been forbidden for good reason," Velthor interrupted. "Our ancestors feared what they might summon. But our ancestors weren't facing extinction." She turned to address the entire bridge crew. "Prepare the calling chamber. Channel power from our remaining solar collectors. We're going to contact the Deathworlders." The preparation took 4 hours. Deep in the ship's core, the ancient summoning array hummed to life for the first time in millennia. Crystalline formations that had been dormant since the First Age began to glow with eldritch energy. The power requirements were staggering. They had to drain energy from 3 dying stars, just to charge the array. Velthor stood in the center of the chamber, surrounded by floating holographic displays showing data from across the galaxy. There, quantum computers had been searching for weeks, analyzing every world in their databases that might harbor the legendary Deathworlders. Most planets classified as habitable were too gentle, too peaceful. They needed something different, to a world so hostile that its inhabitants would be forged into weapons of war. Only one planet had matched their parameters, a small blue world in the Orion Arm, designated as Sol 3 in their star charts, xenobiology. Database classified it as a Class 12 Deathworlder rating so high that most Solani scientists had assumed it was uninhabitable. The planet's surface was mostly covered in corrosive dihydrogen monoxide, subjected to constant electromagnetic radiation from its star, and plagued by extreme weather patterns that could destroy cities in minutes. But their long-range sensors had detected something impossible. Not only was the world inhabited, but its population was thriving. The beings there had somehow adapted to conditions that would kill most galactic species within hours. If the legends were true, if Deathworlders really existed, this world would be their home. "Array at full power," reported the chief technician, sweat beading on his crystalline forehead despite the chamber's cold temperature. "High Counselor, are you certain about this?" "The old texts speak of terrible consequences. The consequences of inaction are certain," Velthor replied, placing her hands on the control matrix. The consequences of action are merely probable. The array activated with a sound like reality tearing. Space itself seemed to bend and twist as the summoning energies reached across the void. Seeking contact with the distant Deathworld, the air in the chamber crackled with power, and several of the technicians stepped back in fear as arcs of energy danced between the crystalline formations. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the communication array sparked to life with an incoming transmission. The signal was strong, clear, and completely unexpected. Instead of the roars of savage beasts or the whispers of ancient spirits, they heard something far more chilling: the calm, professional voice of someone who dealt with life and death as a matter of routine. "This is Admiral Dayhine of the Terran Defense Fleet. You have our attention." The voice carried no fear, no surprise, no emotion at all. It was the voice of a predator that had just been awakened, and Velthar realized with growing terror that her desperate gamble might have summoned something far more dangerous than she had ever imagined. In the silence that followed, she could hear her own heart's beating and wondered if she had just saved her people or doomed the entire galaxy. The bridge sensors on the Eternal Hope began screaming warnings just 6 hours after the summoning ritual. What they detected should have been impossible. Ships were materializing at the edge of Zilani space, but not through any known form of faster-than-light travel. These vessels simply appeared, as if they had been waiting in the shadows between stars. Commander Zethka's hands flew over his console, his multiple eyes wide with disbelief. "Hi, Counselor. I'm reading 37 contacts approaching at—" "This can't be right. What is it?" Velthar demanded, rushing to his station. "They're accelerating at 1,200 gravities. No living crew could survive those forces. The pressure would turn any biological matter into liquid." On the main display, the approaching ships resolved into view. They were nothing like the elegant curved vessels that most civilizations preferred. These were predators made of metal and ceramic, all sharp angles and brutal efficiency. Their hulls were matte black, drinking in starlight rather than reflecting it. Weapon ports lined their sides like the teeth of some massive beast. The lead ship was smaller than the others, but moved with deadly precision. Long-range scans revealed it was bristling with weapon systems that the Zilani computers couldn't even identify. Energy signatures showed power levels that should have required a small star to generate. "Incoming transmission," the communications officer announced, his voice shaking. "Put it through," Velthar ordered. The holographic display flickered to life, showing the interior of what was clearly a military vessel. The lighting was harsh and white, casting sharp shadows across surfaces that looked more like the inside of a weapon than a ship. Standing in the center was a figure that made every Zilani on the bridge take a step backward. The being was tall, nearly 2 meters, with a frame that suggested both speed and devastating strength. Her skin was pale, almost white, stretched over muscles that moved with the fluid grace of a natural predator. Her eyes were dark, calculating, and completely without fear. She wore form-fitting armor that seemed to shift and change as she moved, adapting to her environment. "I am Captain Soman of the Terran vessel Dauntless," she said, her voice carrying the absolute authority of someone who had never lost a battle. "We received your summoning. Prepare for boarding." "Boarding?" Velthar stammered. "But we didn't." "Invite?" The transmission cut off. 30 seconds later, the Dauntless was alongside their flagship, moving with impossible precision. The Zilani watched in amazement as the human ship somehow bypassed their shields without triggering a single alarm. Docking clamps engaged with a solid thunk that echoed through the hull. "A security to the docking bay," Velthar ordered, but her voice lacked conviction. Something told her that security would be useless against these beings. The docking bay doors opened with a hiss of equalizing atmosphere. What emerged made the Zilani guards drop their weapons in terror. Captain Soman stepped through first, her movements fluid and controlled. Behind her came 4 Marines, each one a nightmare made flesh. They were encased in armor that seemed alive, its surface rippling with energy patterns that hurt to look at directly. Their helmets completely concealed their faces, showing only glowing red sensors that swept the area with mechanical precision. Each Marine carried weapons that hummed with barely contained power rifles that looked like they could punch holes through starship hulls. The humans moved in perfect formation, covering every angle, their weapons never quite pointing at anyone, but somehow making it clear that they could eliminate every living being in the bay in seconds. The temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees just from their presence. Captain Soman walked directly to Velthar, ignoring the trembling guards completely. Close. The human was even more intimidating. Her eyes held the cold calculation of an apex predator, and her enhanced physiology was obvious in the way she moved too fast. It's too strong, too precise for any natural evolution. "Explain your situation," she said. Her words clipped and efficient. Veltares' speech organs quivered as she tried to find her voice. The harvesters. They came from the void 3 years ago. We don't know where they originated, but they consume everything in their path. She gestured to the holographic displays that showed the tactical situation. Star systems marked in red indicated worlds that had been completely consumed. The pattern was spreading like a cancer across Zilani's space. They convert matter directly into energy, Velthor continued, her voice growing stronger as she explained the crisis. Entire planets, stripped bare in hours. Our weapons are useless against them. Our shields might as well be made of paper. Captain Soman studied the displays with the focused intensity of a hunting cat. Her eyes tracked the enemy movements, calculating patterns and possibilities. One of her Marines stepped forward and whispered something in her era language that sounded harsh and efficient. "Built for giving orders in combat. 60% territorial loss in 3 standard years," Soman observed. "Exponential expansion pattern. No communication attempts. Successful." She looked directly at Velthor. "You're dealing with self-replicating machines. Von Neumann constructors." Von Neumann? Velthor had never heard the term. Self-reproducing machines that consume raw materials to build copies of themselves. Usually they're programmed with a single directive: expand and multiply. Soman's expression grew grimmer. If they're true von Neumann machines, they won't stop with your territory. They'll consume the entire galaxy given enough time. The implications hit Velthor like a physical blow. Not just her people, but every living thing in the galaxy would eventually be converted into raw materials for these mechanical parasites. Captain Soman activated a device on her wrist, and her voice carried clearly through the connection. "Admiral Dehaen, we have a confirmed von Neumann scenario. Exponential expansion, no communication possible, 60% territorial consumption in 36 standard months." The reply came instantly, the voice carrying the same cold authority as the captain. "Understood, Captain. Assessment phase authorized." "We're coming." As the connection ended, Soman turned back to Velthor. "Admiral Dehaen will want to see these machines for himself. Prepare your fastest ships. We're going to the front lines." Velthar felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. She had summoned Deathworlders, expecting salvation. But looking into Captain Soman's predatory eyes, she wondered if she had simply replaced one extinction with another. Journey to the contested border took 3 days. But for the Zilani crew aboard the Eternal Hope, it felt like a nightmare that stretched for eternity. They had thought they understood space combat after centuries of peaceful exploration and minor conflicts. They were wrong. Admiral Dehaen's flagship Retribution materialized at the head of the human formation, like death itself taking physical form. The vessel was massive, easily twice the size of the largest Zilani dreadnought, but it moved with the fluid grace of a living predator. Its hull was scarred from countless battles, each mark telling a story of victory against impossible odds. Behind it came 27 additional human warships, and watching them maneuver was like witnessing a perfectly choreographed dance of destruction. They moved in 3-dimensional formations that hurt the mind to follow, spinning around each other in patterns that should have resulted in catastrophic collisions. Instead, they flowed through space like a school of metallic fish, each vessel anticipating the other's movements with supernatural precision. Commander Zethka stood at his tactical station, his forearms trembling as he tried to track the human ship's movements. "Hi, Counselor. Their acceleration readings are impossible. That lead destroyer just pulled 1,800 gravities in a turn that should have torn it apart." Velthor watched the tactical display with growing amazement and terror. The human ships were performing maneuvers that violated everything she knew about physics and biology. No crew should be able to survive the forces involved, yet the ships moved with deadly precision through gravitational fields that would have crushed Zilani vessels like empty cans. "How are they doing this?" she whispered Captain Soman, who had remained aboard the Zilani flagship as a liaison, answered without taking her eyes off the tactical display. "Enhanced physiology, inertial dampeners, gravitic compensators. When you evolve on a world that's constantly trying to kill you, you learn to adapt." She paused, "Or you die." The human formation suddenly scattered as proximity alarms began screaming throughout the fleet. On the main display, the enemy revealed itself in all its terrible glory. The harvester swarm emerged from behind a dead moon like a plague of mechanical locusts, their geometric hulls gleaming with the light of consumed stars. Each harvester drone was massive, easily the size of a city, its surface covered in conversion arrays that pulsed with hungry energy. They moved in perfect mathematical formations, their flight patterns precise and emotionless. There were hundreds of them, maybe thousands, forming geometric shapes that stretched across millions of kilometers of space. Admiral Dahine's voice crackled over the communications array, calm and professional, despite facing an enemy that had destroyed entire civilizations. "All units maintain formation. Beginning tactical assessment." Commander Jae-sung, aboard the human destroyer Indomitable, began his analysis immediately. His ship darted between the harvester formations like a minnow swimming through a school of mechanical sharks, its sensors recording every detail of enemy construction and behavior. "Energy signatures confirm matter-to energy conversion capability," reported, his voice steady as conversion beams lanced past his ship, each one capable of vaporizing mountains. "Hull composition appears to be adaptive metal-ceramic composite. Weapon systems are built for maximum efficiency rather than innovation." The Zilani watched in horrified fascination as the human commander deliberately exposed his ship to enemy fire, using the incoming attacks to analyze harvester weapon patterns and defensive capabilities. It was either the bravest or most insane thing Velthar had ever witnessed. For exactly 17 minutes, Commander Jae-sung danced his ship through the mechanical swarm, dodging conversion beams and matter disintegration rays while his sensors cataloged every aspect of enemy technology. Then his voice cut through the tactical channel with surgical precision. "Assessment complete. All units initiate combat evaluation. Rules of engagement, total destruction." What happened next redefined Velthor's understanding of warfare. The human ships didn't attack, they dissected. Their weapons, unlike anything in Zilani databases, sliced through harvester hulls with surgical precision. Particle beams that could cut through neutronium carved geometric patterns in enemy armor, while missiles that seemed to think for themselves sought out critical systems with predatory intelligence. The Retribution unleashed a barrage that looked like controlled lightning, each bolt finding gaps in harvester defenses that shouldn't have existed until the moment they were created. Smaller human vessels darted through the mechanical formation, their crews seemingly unaffected by gravitational forces that would have liquefied any other species. But the most terrifying display came when the humans began boarding operations. Lieutenant Yuna led a team of Marines directly into the heart of a damaged harvester, her assault shuttle punching through hull plating that was harder than diamond. Inside the enemy vessel, conditions that would have killed most life forms instantly became just another working environment for the human boarding party. The internal atmosphere was a mixture of superheated plasma and exotic radiation that registered as lethal on every Zilani sensor. The artificial gravity fluctuated wildly, swinging from crushing weight to complete weightlessness in seconds. Lieutenant Yuna's voice came through the communications array, steady and professional despite the impossible environment. "Internal structure confirmed. Automated systems throughout, no biological components detected." Her team moved through corridors that glowed white-hot with reactor energy, their armor adapting to conditions that would have melted most materials. They fought their way past automated defenses, mechanical guardians that shot beams hot enough to vaporize steel, treating the deadly environment like a minor inconvenience. Reactor core reached Yuna reported, her voice unchanged despite fighting in conditions that resembled the interior of a star. These machines are completely autonomous, but follow rigid programming. No creativity, no adaptation. They're following patterns established at manufacture. She paused as her team disabled the core systems with explosive charges that could crack moons. Structural analysis complete. These drones are not independent. They're receiving instructions from a central source. Recommend we trace the command. Signals to their origin. Admiral Daehyun's response came immediately, his voice carrying the weight of absolute decision. Understood, Lieutenant. All units, prepare for full fleet mobilization. We're not just stopping these machines, we're going to find where they come from and end this threat permanently. As the human fleet began forming up for what promised to be the largest military operation in galactic history, Velthar realized that her people hadn't just summoned allies. They had awakened something that treated the impossible as routine and approached warfare with the methodical precision of a surgical procedure. The question now wasn't whether the humans could stop the harvesters. The question was, what would be left of the galaxy when they finished? The first sign that something unprecedented was happening came when the long-range sensors aboard the Eternal Hope began detecting spatial anomalies across 100 light-years of space. Reality itself seemed to be tearing open at dozens of points simultaneously, creating rifts in the fabric of the universe that glowed with otherworldly energy. "High Counselor," the sensor operator called out, his voice cracking with disbelief. "I'm reading massive hyperspace distortions. Something big is coming through." Belther rushed to the tactical display, her crystalline eyes widening as she saw the scope of what was approaching. The distortions weren't random. They were forming a perfect three-dimensional grid around the entire contested region. As if some vast intelligence was positioning forces with mathematical precision. Then the first ships began emerging from hyperspace. The lead vessel that materialized was beyond anything in Zilani experience. The dreadnought Eternal Vengeance stretched for nearly 20 kilometers, its hull bristling with weapon systems that could reduce moons to asteroid fields. Its armor was scarred from countless battles across the galaxy, each mark a testament to humanity's endless wars, but it wasn't alone. Behind it came wave after wave of human warships, emerging from hyperspace in formations that blocked out entire starfields. Battlecruisers that could crack continents, destroyers that moved like hunting wolves, and carriers that launched fighter craft in numbers that defied counting. Admiral Velkith of the Zilani Defense Force stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the human fleet deploy with the growing realization that everything he thought he knew about warfare was hopelessly outdated. At 57 cycles old, he had commanded fleets in the sector wars, the rebellion of the outer colonies, and the great pirate hunt. He considered himself a veteran of galactic conflict. He had never seen anything like this. "Tactical, give me numbers," he ordered, his voice barely steady. His tactical officer, a young Zilani named Korthal, worked frantically at his console. "Sir, I'm reading. This can't be correct. Computer must be malfunctioning. Give me the numbers, Lieutenant." 12,000 combat vessels, Admiral. Plus support craft, logistics ships, medical frigates, and mobile repair stations. Total. Fleet strength, ... double quotes. He paused, checking the readings again. 100,000 vessels, sir? Admiral Velkith's four hearts stopped beating for a moment. His entire civilization's combined military force numbered fewer than 300 ships. The humans had brought a fleet larger than anything that had existed in recorded galactic history. The carrier, Infinite Fury alone, launched 30,000 fighter craft, each one piloted by enhanced humans who treated the vacuum of space as their natural environment. Captain Hyenwu led Dragon Squadron through a debris field left by a previous battle, his fighter dancing between chunks of destroyed harvester drones at speeds that should have been impossible. Dragon Leader to all wings. His voice crackled over the communications array, calm and professional, despite pulling maneuvers that generated forces exceeding 50 gravities. Enemy contact bearing 2-7 mark for a standard attack formation. Remember, these machines don't feel fear, so don't expect them to break. His wingman, Lieutenant Sujin, rolled her fighter through a spiral that took her between two pieces of debris, separated by less than a meter. Copy that, Dragon Leader. Though I don't think they need to feel fear. They're scary enough for both sides. The fighter squadrons moved through space like flocks of metallic birds, their formation flying so precise that they seemed to be controlled by a single mind. Each pilot was enhanced, their reflexes boosted to superhuman levels, their bodies adapted to survive conditions that would kill most species instantly. Meanwhile, the logistics operation that supported this massive fleet was equally impressive. Hospital ships like the Mercy's Edge were staffed by medical personnel, who routinely treated injuries that would be instantly fatal to any other species. Commander Yunji supervised trauma centers that could reattach severed limbs, treat radiation, poisoning that would cook most organic matter, and perform surgery in zero gravity while under enemy fire. Prep Trauma Bay 7, she ordered, reviewing casualty reports from the latest skirmish. We've got a Marine coming in who took a direct hit from a conversion beam. Third-degree plasma burns over 60% of his body. Her surgical team moved with practiced efficiency. In any other species, such injuries would be fatal. For enhanced humans, it was a challenging but routine procedure. The supply ships were equally remarkable. Vessels like the Industrial Might carried weapons that violated several galactic treaties on destructive capability. Planet crackers that could split worlds along their fault lines. Stellar disruptors that could destabilize stars. And antimatter warheads that could sterilize entire solar systems. Captain Zhang Su supervised the weapons distribution. His teams loading ordnance that could reshape the galactic balance of power. These Nova bombs are cleared for use only on direct authorization from Fleet Command. He briefed his crew. Each one carries enough firepower to destroy everything within a light-hour radius. Colonel Minho, commanding the human Marine contingent, stood before a holographic display showing the tactical situation. Around him, representatives from dozens of human military units listened with the focused attention of professional soldiers who had never lost a war. The enemy has established a manufacturing base somewhere in this region, he explained, highlighting a section of space on the tactical display. Our mission is simple. Find it, destroy it, and eliminate every trace of the Harvester Plague. He paused, his eyes scanning the assembled officers. We're not here to contain the threat. We're not here to negotiate. We're here to commit genocide against an artificial species that has chosen to make war on organic life. Admiral Velkith, listening to the briefing as an observer, felt a chill run down his spine. The human officer spoke of planetary destruction. With the same casual tone most species use to discuss weather patterns. Questions, Colonel Minho asked. The silence that followed was absolute. The human military machine radiated confidence so complete that it seemed to bend reality around itself. These were beings who had spent their entire evolutionary history fighting wars. First against their own hostile planet, then against each other, and finally against the hostile universe itself. Very well, Minho continued. Operation Cleansing. Fire begins in 6 hours. All units prepare for extended campaign. We're going to hunt these machines to the ends of the galaxy if necessary. As the briefing ended and the massive fleet began moving toward the Harvester territories, Velthar realized that her desperate summoning had unleashed something far beyond her comprehension. The humans hadn't just answered her call for help, they had mobilized their entire civilization for war. The question now wasn't whether they could stop the Harvesters. The question was whether anything in the galaxy would be left standing when humanity finished its work. The hunt began with the systematic destruction of 37 star systems. The human fleet moved like a tide of metal and death, pursuing the retreating Harvester swarms with relentless precision. Every battle was a masterclass in controlled violence, each engagement planned and executed with surgical efficiency. General Tehi stood on the bridge of her flagship Absolute Zero, watching the tactical displays as her forces cornered the last major Harvester fleet near the edge of known space. The enemy had been running for weeks, their mechanical minds finally programmed with something resembling survival instinct. "Ma'am, we've tracked their retreat vector," reported her tactical officer. "They're heading for coordinates that show massive gravitational distortion. Something big is out there." The destination was a nightmare beyond imagination. As the human fleet emerged from hyperspace, they found themselves staring at a construction complex that defied all understanding of engineering. The harvesters had built their primary manufacturing facility around a neutron star, using the stellar remnants' crushing gravity to compress raw matter into the exotic materials needed for their reproduction. The factory complex stretched across millions of kilometers, its geometric structures dancing in the impossible gravitational fields, like mechanical spiders weaving webs from space-time itself. Massive foundries hung in stable orbits, their hulls glowing white-hot from the radiation of the neutron star. Assembly lines that could build city-sized drones snaked through the gravity well, their robotic arms moving with inhuman precision. "God," whispered Commander Park, the fleet's chief scientist, "they're using the neutron star's magnetic field to create matter from pure energy. They're not just building ships, they're creating the very atoms they need from the quantum foam." General Tahi studied the readings with cold professionalism. Estimated production capacity? At current rates, they could construct 1 million drones per standard day. Exponential expansion would consume the entire galaxy within 50 years. The assault began with precision strikes that seemed to violate the laws of physics. Human vessels dove into gravitational fields that should have crushed them into atomic paste, their hulls reinforced with materials that existed only in the hearts of dead stars. Pilots like Captain Haiyanwu used the neutron star's gravity as a weapon, slingshotting their fighters around the stellar remnant to achieve velocities approaching 10% of light speed. "Dragon Squadron, follow my lead," Haiyanwu called out, his voice steady, despite pulling maneuvers that generated forces exceeding 2,000 gravities. "We're going to thread the needle between those magnetic field lines." Spider Squadron dove through space-time distortions that twisted reality into impossible shapes. The neutron star's magnetic field was so intense that it created visible aurora effects in the vacuum, sheets of charged particles that glowed like curtains of death. Any normal pilot would have been killed instantly by the radiation, but the enhanced humans treated it like turbulent weather. The boarding assault was led by Major Donghain, whose Marines had been specially modified for operations in extreme gravitational environments. Their power armor was reinforced with exotic matter that could withstand the crushing forces near the neutron star, while their enhanced physiology allowed them to function in conditions that would liquefy most organic matter. "Breaching charges set," reported Sergeant Su Young, her voice calm despite standing on the hull of a factory complex, where gravity fluctuated between crushing weight and complete weightlessness every few seconds. Preparing for entry. The Marines punched through hull plating that was harder than diamond, their weapons cutting through materials that existed nowhere else in the galaxy. Inside the factory complex, they found corridors that defied comprehension passages, where up and down changed meaning every few meters, where the walls themselves pulsed with gravitational waves. "Structural integrity holding," Su Young reported, leading her squad through a chamber where the very air glowed with Serenkov radiation. These machines built their factory to withstand the neutron star's tidal forces. "Everything is reinforced beyond normal engineering parameters." The Marines moved through the facility like ghosts, their enhanced senses allowing them to navigate through conditions that would kill most life forms instantly. Automated defenses that shot beams of compressed gravity were simply obstacles to be overcome. Mechanical guardians that fired streams of neutronium were just another challenge. Deep in the factory's core, they found the central processing unit, a crystalline structure the size of a city that pulsed with quantum calculations. It was the brain of the entire harvester network, the source of their coordinated behavior across the galaxy. "Factory core located," Su Young announced, placing demolition charges around the quantum processor. Beginning demolition sequence. Estimated time to detonation, 30 seconds. Meanwhile, outside the factory complex, human engineers led by Chief Technician Kyung Min were preparing something unprecedented. They had positioned gravitational manipulators at strategic points around the neutron star, devices that could alter the fabric of space-time itself. "Gravitational resonance achieved," Kyung Min reported, his hands flying over controls that channeled energies equivalent to stellar output, initiating directed collapse sequence. The neutron star itself became a weapon. Gravitational pulses, timed with mathematical precision, began tearing apart the factory complex from within. Structures that had withstood the crushing forces of a collapsed star for centuries began to buckle and fail, as space-time itself was turned against them. Fusion charges detonated in carefully calculated sequences, each explosion adding to the growing cascade of destruction. The factory complex, which had seemed indestructible, began to collapse into the neutron star, like a house of cards in a hurricane. The Zilani fleet watched from a safe distance of several light hours, their sensors barely able to process the scale of destruction. High Counselor Velthor stood on her bridge, watching the tactical displays with growing amazement as the humans systematically dismantled a structure that had seemed beyond the reach of any conventional military force. "The readings are off the charts," reported her science officer. "They're destabilizing the neutron star's magnetic field. The energy release is equivalent to a supernova. When the last harvester construct was consumed by the directed stellar fire, silence fell across the battlefield. The neutron star continued to spin, its magnetic field now chaotic and unstable, but the threat was ended. The factory complex had been reduced to exotic matter falling into the stellar remnants, crushing gravity well." Admiral Tian's voice crackled across all frequencies. Calm and professional, despite orchestrating the largest military operation in galactic history. "Hostile force eliminated. Sector secured. All Zilani vessels. Welcome to the Terran Protection Network." Velthor stared at the tactical display in stunned silence. In less than 3 weeks, the humans had accomplished what her civilization had failed to do in 3 years of desperate warfare. They hadn't just defeated the harvesters, they had hunted them to extinction with the methodical efficiency of apex predators. "What are we now?" she asked her aide, her voice barely a whisper. The young Zilani considered the question carefully. "Protected, High Counselor. We are protected by Deathworlders." As the human fleet established patrol routes throughout the former harvester territory, the Zilani realized they had gained more than allies. They had become part of something larger, a growing network of civilizations under the protection of creatures who treated impossibility as a minor inconvenience and turned survival into an art form. In the depths of space, Admiral Dayhine filed his final report: harvester threat neutralized, no survivors detected, continuing patrol protocols. Humanity stands ready. The age of the harvesters was over. The age of human protection had begun. The end.